So 9 days ago, I had surgery on both eyes, and they what they actually did was take the muscles that were kind of old and crotchety like me, and they cut them to be shorter. Because before 2 weeks ago, my you may have not noticed it, and a lot of people don't notice it, but my eyes often tend to go off in different directions, and this eye stays pretty much the same, but this one can wander off to about 30 degrees. So, but the reason I'm wearing an eye patch today, the surgery didn't cure me immediately. All it did was shorten the muscles in my eyes, and what it actually did was, instead of my eyes looking this direction, the surgeon made them look this direction. So they're a little bit crossed right now. And so if I were to look at you, it'd be kind of weird, but I'm still crossed. But the idea is that hopefully in time, I will learn, my brain will go, hey, this is a new situation, and it will negotiate with the muscles in my eyes to get them eventually to go the same direction. So that's my goal. I call it therapy on myself. I therapy on my brain to teach it how to work with my new eyes. So I'm excited about that. And after 9 days, I'd say so far so good. I think the surgeon did a great job, and so I'm hopeful. You want to go ahead and show the first slide? Great. Okay. Another thing I want to say is I'm not sure how this sharing of my experience turned into a TED Talk slideshow. But I'm comfortable with media and putting together a story. And also over the years, I've become kind of there's a lot of family photos in this slideshow. And I've kind of become the historian of our family on Ancestry. And so I have a lot of photos from a long time ago. So, and the title, I'm not even sure why I came up with the title, Permission to Be Free. I've been thinking about it, and it resonated, just the words resonated with me, because we all know people that we think they look free. They look like, oh, I'm just so comfortable, I'm in my own skin. But a lot of us are not comfortable in our own skin to be free. And it's almost like we need permission to be free sometimes. And so that's why I came up with that title. It doesn't mean a whole lot, but asking, receiving, and accepting permission to be free. So I guess I'll just do this. Next slide. All right. You might recognize these two young men. This is Chuck Duer in his whitey-tighties. And this is yours truly next to him, about 6 years older. This was at a Christmas celebration at our house. I think that was our house on Rocky Brook Road, wasn't it? Chuck, do you remember who took this picture? I have no idea. But what they captured on my face was how I feel about babysitting. So that's how I feel about babysitting, and also captures the joy of Chuck Duer. That guy had the most joyful first 3, 4, 5 years, and he was just a barrel of laughs. He was great. So I just wanted you guys to have a context. That's why I'm always wandering back to talk to Chuck during church. So, all right, and these other photos, the one at the top is Leonardo da Vinci's painting called Salvator Mundi, which means Savior of the World. And I'm calling this photo Savior of Mayberry, or Savior of Opelika. So that's kind of what I thought I was when I got my Cub Scout uniform. So, all right, let's go to the next one. All right, so this first photo is almost 100 years old, and there's a lot going on in this photo. The young man at the far left is my father at age 14. And the coach in the middle is his older brother, Alva. And so it's possible that my dad was a water boy, or I doubt if he was a player on this team, but he knew the coach, so he got in the picture. But Uncle Al is the most famous doer that I know about. And he's very famous in a lot. There's a picture of him with his friend Harry Truman. he was Uncle Al. After he left this job as a high school coach, he traveled to Pepperdine with his family and became one of the early Pepperdine basketball coaches. And not only did he do a good job as a basketball coach, he became an organizer of coaches all over the country through associations of coaches and that kind of thing, like the National Association of Intercollegiate Athletics. And he was just an administrator. What I'm really proud of my Uncle Al for what he did was he really worked hard and got criticized for integrating basketball teams at colleges. And at this time, of course, this would be 10 years later in the early 50s, it was white teams and black teams, and there weren't any mixed teams. But Uncle Al, I keep seeing articles of what he did to get people to start thinking differently about basketball. And if anybody would want integration, it's got to be a basketball coach. Yeah. Because they want to win, right? They want to win, and that's why they want to. That's maybe a motive for innovating. But anyway, Al was inducted in the Basketball Hall of Fame. He was on the Olympic Committee for a while. That's why the reason I say he's friends with Harry Truman. This is probably an official function. This picture came from the Truman Library, but they were both businessmen in Kansas City, Missouri. And so when this is Harry retired, I think. This is retired President Truman. And so they were shaking hands at this. And probably Al was on the Olympic Committee, and Harry had a function to welcome these athletes that were on the Olympics. The other thing I wanted to quickly say about these two guys, the reason this photo is really important to me is because my dad was, in this picture, he was the exact age that I was the day he passed away 40 years later of his fourth heart attack. So it's weird for me to see a picture of my dad at 14. But both of these men, Max and Al, became elders in different churches at different times. But so there's a lot. Oh, and the only other thing I wanted to say was, and I can't spend a lot of time on each slide. I'm going to have to move this along. But Max totally adored his older brother, who was a coach, and just wanted to be like him. So that so Al was a teacher and he was a coach. So Dad, as soon as he graduated, he became a teacher and a coach, but didn't have nearly the success of his bigger brother. So let's go on to the next slide. All right. These are my parents. This is my dad and my mother, Corrine, and that's Max Duer Jr. In 1943. This was taken in Texas, and then this is just a picture of the Western Auto Store in Opelika. And when Dad got out of the military, he got a grant. What do they call it? Some kind of a grant to start a business. So we started that business. Most of you may not even remember the Western Auto Store, but if you've ever watched Back to the Future, that logo of the Western Auto Store is all over that movie, because they talked about it a lot. And just only other thing, I remember in the 90s, I read a book by Tom Brokaw called The Greatest Generation. Well, both of these pictures epitomize the greatest generation for me. These are people who spent their adolescence in the Depression, and then they went to Europe and stopped Hitler. So that's the greatest generation. That's what they did. All right, let's go to the next slide. And this is more a little bit later. My mother was pregnant with me in this photo, and the reason that they're all laughing is because Max was taking the picture, and my dad picked up a picture of Max to show that he would be in the picture. So that cracked everybody up. That's the kind of my dad's sense of humor. These three are, of course, Max and my sister Donna, and my younger brother Alan, whom I never met. I call them siblings before my time. Robert Allen, unfortunately, came down with cancer at age 5. He died in 1957. Well, The doctor told my mother, "You're 36 years old. If you're going to have another child, get to it, get to it right away." And she decided to do that, and here I am. So, and I don't know how else to say this, but I was a replacement for Robert. And it's kind of a crude way to look at it. But as a young man, I thought, I would not have even been here if Robert had not died. So that gave me a concept of this idea of death is really a transition into another life. It's just amazing how that works. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, more pictures of siblings. So I was a little baby, and I was like an only child, so I got spoiled like an only child. And I don't know if my siblings regretted it or were didn't care for it that much, but okay. So then, of course, we've loved each other for many years, and had our ups and downs, but mostly just loved each other. Let's go to the next picture. Okay, some of these slides have words on them, so sorry about that. But I want to explain more about this idea of permission to be free. So the first one I say, my parents and siblings gave me permission to feel loved, accepted, valued, and competent. And we can just stop right there with this slideshow because that is such an important. Some of us had that. Some of us were lucky enough to have that, but not everybody has that. And I feel so lucky to have been in a family where I was loved. And I threw in the word competent because that's important to Enneagram fives and anybody in the thinking and the fearful triad. But competency is an important thing. Elementary school. Now, I'm also going to be using language that comes from Richard Rohr's book, Falling Upward. How many have read Falling Upward? See, a lot of people have, and I would recommend it to absolutely anybody, but especially if you're either approaching retirement, considering retirement, or trying to figure out what to do in retirement. It's a great book. It helped me so much to think about, man. And I retired early because my boss says, sorry, there's no more money to pay you. So we're just going to, they pushed me out of it was a dream job. I loved the job for 20 years, but the money ran out. And so I had to retire early. So I picked up Richard Rohr's Falling Upward. And there's a lot of language in this slide. And also, I just want to say, if I go too fast or if I go too weird, feel free to raise your hand and ask questions. I'll answer questions. All right. So elementary school helped me to begin building a container for the first half of life. My church, where my dad was an elder, gave me permission to consider myself a young worship and song leader. And I tell you what, young people, all of us need permission like that. So we think you can lead in our church. That's just a big deal. Mike Cook was my favorite teacher in high school, my band director. He gave me permission to improvise within the boundaries of jazz. And he gave me permission to feel music as the blood in my veins and my life's purpose. And that's really, so my dad, I mentioned earlier, my dad died my freshman year on Christmas Eve. So it was a horrible, horrible time. I was depressed after that in my freshman year. And I needed a life's purpose. And my grades at that time, after my dad's death, my grades went, I wasn't doing well in school. But then I got active. I was always active in band, so I got active in band. And the band had a new rule that said, if you don't keep your grades up to a C average, you can't stay in the band. So that's why I got my grades up, so I could stay in the band with this band director. And I just really loved him and what the way he taught. Ken, you didn't have him, did you? You had him for a while, and then they transitioned to a new. So Ken's 9 years younger than me, and we went to the same high school. So, all right, my dad died on Christmas Eve of his fourth heart attack. I was 14-year-old high school freshman, and this event, this existential suffering event, gave me permission to cry out desperately for loss of father, and I started noticing scriptures that say, I am the father of the fatherless. And so I immediately, as soon as I could, I adopted a new father. And I started thinking about God and more seriously, and thought about what it means to be in a relationship with him. And I believe I dove into music as a distraction from grief. So I think that's a big part of it. So next slide tells you the story about that. I'm not going to tell you all these pictures, but this just shows you that I never missed an audition for any group. That I was always there. So there's Mike Cook over here with the group in the red. That's Mike Cook. Um, Another thing I wanted to share in about this whole thing is that I jump around a lot. I was in 3 colleges before I got my undergraduate degree, and then I got a 4th master's degree. But I jump around a lot. I change my mind a lot, and that's a theme that I've noticed in this story of my life, is that I like to keep my options open, and I like the freedom to change my mind if I'm not happy somewhere. So I started in Abilene, and for a year, I spent a year in Abilene, and then I went to Auburn, which is the middle photo, for 1 quarter, and then I transferred to Harding for the rest of my music stuff. So, but the only picture I want to go into detail about is that one where I'm playing in the Auburn band, playing trumpet. I have friends that literally hate me for that picture because I didn't even know the picture was in the yearbook, but it was a full color photo of me me right up front playing the trumpet. And some of my friends says, Ron, I went to Auburn for 4 years, and they never put a color picture of me. So I was just there for 1 quarter, and I got that picture. It's kind of funny. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, another slide with words. Professor Cliff Gaddis at Harding University gave me permission to truly appreciate music history. And it's hard work learning. Music history is a hard course, but he was so good at it. And since I was such a band guy, I didn't have an appreciation for choral music. But Harding is real big on choral music, and I learned a lot about choirs and choral music at that time. And 4 different universities helped me fine-tune my first half container as a music educator. So there's those words, container, first half of life container. And that's from Falling Upward. It's also, Richard Ward was not the only person to use those terms. Carl Jung used them before him. First half of life, second half of life. And the first half of life is spent building a container to move you into the second half of life. And that's a big theme in Falling Upward. All right, so his players, at Harding, I met some really talented drama people, and we put together a group that would do skits and songs, and we would travel to different churches, and we had a blast. And we felt free because we had a modern message. You know, we went into these churches where, frankly, we felt that people were feeling not free. And we thought the lightheartedness of our entertainment would just help them to relax a little bit. And that was really what it was about, to invite church folk to consider harder questions and maybe experience more freedom. All right, I'm going to mention 4 authors in this little slideshow. And the first one is M. Scott Peck. It was a big. This was on the Oprah Book Club. It was a big book. Everybody was reading it. And I mean, how many people read it? Yeah. Several people read it. It was a pretty good book, a great book. And I'm telling you, it was life-changing for me, because at the end of that book, after I put down the last chapter, I went in the next room and I wrote my first song ever. And I'd like to sing it for you in a few minutes, but let's go on to the next slide. Okay, now in my 30s, I had some other music gigs. Magnolia Highway played almost every weekend at the Opelika Elks Lodge, and not only it was the time when Garth Brooks and Reba McEntire was a big deal, you know. So we did hot country hits was what we played, and but what I loved about that time, those 3 years, I learned how to play the cha-cha, the rumba, the waltz, I'm trying to think of all the dances that people said, could you do a rumba? We've been going to dancing lessons, and we want to do a rumba. So, and that's all in country music. So I learned about how dance. One of the things I didn't feel free about as a young man was that I was not allowed to dance. It was, mm-mm. That leads to all kinds of shenanigans. You don't want to dance. And so that was one of the things I did not feel free about was I wasn't able to dance. So with this band, I learned how to play these different dances. And then there's Lightheart. There's his players. We traveled in St. Louis. This is my buddy Bud Alsup, and we met I was working in a retail music store in St. Louis, and he came in looking for a pedal or something for his guitar, and we hit it off. And then we spent 3 years playing music together. Uh, I mean, we did anything from Simon and Garfunkel to Seals and Crofts, and we did the popular music at that time. All right, next slide. Okay, this is a great story. Another thing this presentation has lots of serendipity and lots of synchronicity. And by serendipity, I mean some major surprises happened. I was in a church at St. Louis, and we had a singles class, and my friend Glennis was in this class. And one Sunday, she came up to me at church and said, "Ron, do you have plans for next week?" I said, "What do you have in mind?" And she said, "Well, I got this grant to do this show all over St. Louis for a year. And my musician keyboardist dropped out on me like 2 days ago." And first thing I thought was, "Oh no, there's no way. I'm sure it's all hip hop and all this music." And I thought, I don't know if I can pull this off. But anyway, it was just a blast. We had a blast playing at schools, and it was just a joy working with me. And it was also a joy working with these audiences. So that was one of my favorite, and it was totally unexpected. I didn't try for this job. It's just totally unexpected. Let's go to the next slide. Okay. So, transitioning from St. Louis, I went through a hard breakup. I had a really nice girlfriend in St. Louis, but frankly, I was feeling lonely for home. So I kind of got it in my mind that I needed to go back home. And so the relationship did not work out. I was devastated that I don't know, why do I feel like I have to go back home? It was kind of a strange situation. So but before I left St. Louis, I was in the Jesuit library at St. Louis University, and I found this little book called Image to Likeness, A Jungian Path in the Gospel Story. And I read it, and it was a short book. Basically, one of the things he said was that each of the gospel writers, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, represented each of Jung's personality functions: thinking, feeling, perception, thinking, feeling, intuition, and sensing. So each one, Mark was the sensor, John with his flowery language and his was the intuitive, Matthew was the thinker, and Luke was the physician, the feeler. So it's just the book floored me that how this worked. So at the same time, I went to a counselor who gave me the Myers-Briggs test, and he said something like, and I was really trying to, I said, why am I so screwed up? Why can I not stick with a decision? Why can't I stick with a girlfriend? I'm jumping around like I always do. I'm jumping around from here to there and making a move here to there. And so he's a great teacher, and a family therapist, a licensed family therapist. He said, "Ron, you're an INTP, and the P means you're adaptable." And I thought, oh, I said, adaptable. Adaptable sounds so much better than unstable. And adaptable, sounds a lot better than crazy. So anyway, he said, what you have kind of running through your veins is just a need to change, a need to not do one thing for a long time, but move on to the next thing. And so he kind of gave me permission to be who I am. And that's really kind of what this feels like. All right. But anyway, here's another serendipity. Dr. Grant's book that I found in the Jesuit library in St. Louis. I read through and I looked at the back cover, and it said Harold Grant was the leading professor of counseling at Auburn University, and he is currently the mayor of Waverly, Alabama. And I thought, whoa, this is my neighbor from Opelika that wrote this book, and he's a deacon in the Catholic Church, and I'll tell you another thing that happened with Dr. Grant. I really asked him if he would be my therapist. I said, would you let me sit down with you as a patient in therapy? And he said, no. But he said, I will offer to be your spiritual director. This is the first time I'd ever heard that term, spiritual director. Wesley's licensed to be a spiritual director. He's gone to school and college recently. So it's a different story about spiritual directing now. But this was my first spiritual director. And I'll tell you, I remember the day I knocked on his door. So I called his house. I looked him up in the phone book, I think. We still had phone books and not the internet at that time. And so I found his number, gave him a call. His wife answered, Sylvia. And she said, why don't you just come on over? And I thought, well, okay. I knocked on their door, and he opened the door, and it was the day of the O.J. Simpson Bronco chase. So everybody was looking at that on the TV. But he welcomed me, and we turned the TV off, and it was just amazing. I was thinking, wow, this is weird. And another thing Dr. Grant did was the reason I got so hyped up in personality studies. He gave the Myers-Briggs test. He was, as an Auburn University professor, he gave the Myers-Briggs test to 3,000 incoming freshmen, and they basically just studied the results, and they figured out which of these people would go to the doctor when they were sick, which of these people would drop out of school, and they started making correlations between their personality type and this. So it was just fascinating to me to get to know Dr. Grant. So before I ended spiritual direction with Dr. Grant, he invited me to read more about Carl Jung, who wrote all the books that the Myers-Briggs is based on. Jung didn't endorse the Myers-Briggs test, but he did. It was his material that was talked about. Okay, then another serendipity was I got my dream job, Auburn University Extension. I got to sit down in an interview, and at some point in the interview, they said, "Are you willing to travel anywhere we send you?" I said, "When do I start?" Because I was free, I was ready, I was available, I was adaptable, and I was ready to go. So I also learned about 4-H experiential learning. How many of you have ever been to a 4-H meeting? Not too many. Yes. So one thing about it, here's the rule. I learned this when in my 40s. Every 4-H meeting has to have a hands-on experiential learning component. It's not just about sitting there and reading a book or listening to a lesson. Every 4-H meeting should have a puzzle to put together. I taught some robotics in my Army job. So hands-on experiential learning. Okay. Then the Army sent me to Europe for Washington, D.C. for 3 years, and then to Europe for 4 years. And it was in Europe that I kind of acted like the teacher in Ecclesiastes. I experienced all the joy, the beauty, and the excesses of life in Europe, and I overdid it. So that's part of this story. I became Epicurean. That's a word I guess I've learned recently. But okay, so let's go on to the next slide. All right, so eventually, here's a picture of and by the way, I think this weekend is Drew Brees is being inducted into the Football Hall of Fame. So my sister's all happy about that. It's because she's wearing a number 9 jersey. This is at a Saints game. And this was the year I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. I weighed 355 pounds. And it's just, it's kind of, it tells you where I was at this point in my life. I was also kind of looking for the next thing. So let's go to the next slide. All right, then the Army moved me to Texas, and where I learned to mega everything, church and barbecue. Um, and eventually, I was drawn in to a Celebrate Recovery meeting at our church in San Antonio. And Celebrate Recovery is a little bit different from 12-step AA meetings or Al-Anon or different, but they all kind of use the same language. And this is where I really spent time with a lot of men, hearing their stories and sharing my story. And I got to tell you, it was eye-opening. They gave me permission to admit that I was powerless, not in control. Learned that I didn't really know a higher power. I thought I did. Look, I was an elder son from Opelika, Alabama. I thought, oh yeah, I know. Me and God we're like. But I really learned that I'm not sure I really knew him. And Richard Rohr calls the 12-step group America's unique contribution to a non-dual spirituality. And I agree totally with that. It's an amazing to actually do the work of the 12 steps, spend time with it, and then spend time helping other people go through it is a great experience. All right, so here, in the times I was living in Texas, you all know that I paid attention to what DF was doing, and I visit here a lot occasionally. It was at DF that I first heard of Father Richard Rohr. And I'm going to use his full title, Father Richard Rohr, OFM. That means he's a father, he's a priest in the Catholic Church, and he's also a Franciscan. And the Franciscans are all about descent. The Franciscans are the ones who go into the leper colonies and live with the really most needy, poverty-filled people. And another thing I love Disciples. There's so many things I love about Disciples Fellowship. I can't spend too much time, but so just talking with Ken and working with Ken, I've been able to play music that I find the most meaningful of all the churches I've ever played music in, and it's because of a freedom that exists here, a freedom that's offered, and I'm grateful. I feel like I can be myself here. I went online and I listened to a lot of those of you who have given my experience before, Rachel's and Daryl's and Mike Brown's and Ken Gunnell's. And I went, and they were great presentations. They didn't need a slideshow. They were really good. But, okay. Then the Army said, okay, we got a job for you in Seoul, Korea. So I went there for 4 years. It was wonderful. But I think what I loved about Carl Jung would say, follow the ancient paths, but also don't just follow the Christian paths or the Jewish paths. Also look at the Buddhist path and look at the Hindu path, because that's really, Hinduism came up long before Christianity. So it's an older path. So living in Korea gave me permission to see what these Buddhists were doing. It's more of a philosophy than it is a religion. Okay, next slide. I think we're almost done. Yeah, I think this is the last slide. Okay, so studying the Enneagram has been kind of funny because I was so into the Myers-Briggs and I learned that model, and it's square, but the Enneagram is round, and so but to me, it's just another model. It's just another model showing the differences and how we're all different and how we're all connected too. And then I've been talking about Richard Rohr and following up where I've said enough about him. And then I've talked about, any more questions about my eye surgery? I think we're good. I think we're good on this. Okay, so I just want to share this song with you. Let's see if my wireless. I wanted to ask Rachel, I hate to put you on the spot, but when when you shared your song, when you shared your Level and Wide, when you shared that song with us for your experience, I was blown away. I thought, wow, that's a talented and gifted and well-trained songwriter. Um, but the question I want to ask you was that song easy to write or hard to write? Yeah. That's the way I feel about the song I'm about to do. And also, in a way, this song reminds me of it's kind of the same format as yours. In your song, you go to your mother and ask these questions about, why are people so hard to understand and I don't get it. And uh and the chorus comes along, life becomes more level and more wide. And I just thought, wow, that's kind of what I wanted to do with this song. So um, let me go ahead and share it with you. I don't, can you hear me okay? Yeah, just to keep this. Okay. Yeah, go ahead and put this song up. Everyone likes to win, but losing is also a part of the game. Failing is not a sin, but failing at failure comes when you fail to trust in the Lord with all of your heart. Don't depend on what you think is smart. Acknowledge Him in all you do, and He will direct your path. Everyone likes to know. Not knowing is also a part of the plan. In His good time He'll show the path lit by trusting that leads to glory. Trust in the Lord with all of your heart. Don't depend on what you think is smart. Acknowledge Him in all you do. He will direct your path. I said, why, God? Why is the pain so great sometimes? I said, how long? Until we see what you have planned. Then it was plain to see that you were preparing my path all along. Why put my trust in me when you are my maker, my friend, my father? Trust in the Lord with all of your heart. Don't depend on what you think is smart. Acknowledge Him in all you do. He will direct your path. He will make straight your path. He will direct your path. Thank you.